First of all, thank you so much for making it this morning. We've heard the traffic coming in is absolutely horrendous. However, not as bad as last year. If any of you were here last year, it was the day that the floods essentially began, and just a few of our team members, like the hardcore crew, actually made it here. And then we kind of stuck it out in the museum all day. My name is Kohlhaas. I'm the CEO and founder of an organization called Bio, and also of an organization called Molecule, molecular biology, so to speak. And want to welcome you all today to a really exciting day that we have that, to me, really represents the convergence of a couple of huge megatrends. And we typically, I think over the past couple of years, as technology has accelerated, we've become almost overloaded with these buzzwords of like blockchain, crypto, AI, and biotech. But DeSci is actually converging all of them in a way that we fundamentally think will accelerate humanity and accelerate biology and life itself. And we have a really exciting day today lined up for all of you. I'm going to give a talk later as well. We have some really cool panels, but the beginning of the day will be dedicated to kind of more looking at DeSci from a TradSci lens and really kind of an introduction to the topic. We have industry heavyweights such as in silico medicine from the AI side, representatives from Roivant, Sofinnova Partners, Apeiron Investments, Christian Angermeyer coming. And this actually represents a huge step change to last year because we increasingly have real industry heavyweights looking at the space and looking how it can solve their challenges. In the afternoon, we'll actually look at so what's happened in DeSci to date, what are some of the real use cases that are emerging, and then in the later afternoon, we'll go into how can we massively accelerate DeSci through the use of artificial intelligence. Before we start all of that, I think it's always important to actually remember why are we here? And the topic DeSci is really is very personal to me. It kind of represents, I think, a long, almost like a lifelong crusade for myself for the betterment of science and the betterment of humanity. I spent a lot of my teenage years kind of in online scientific communities. These were biohacking communities, in some cases looking at nootropic research, longevity, cognitive enhancement. And increasingly then I also began looking at patient communities that were online, like diabetics communities, in some cases HIV communities that were trying to develop their own gene therapies. And I began asking myself, besides intellectual curiosity, why are all of these people online? What are they trying to achieve? And I began realizing that there are many areas that are overlooked by traditional pharma. And I began developing an early thesis that on the one side, there's this powerful potential of people collaborating online, almost in an open source fashion. And on the other side, there are many patient communities or scientific areas that are simply overlooked by traditional venture, by pharma. I began developing an early thesis then. Then kind of stumbled into the Bitcoin ecosystem. I was trading biotech stocks during my studies at university, studied economics, and then stumbled into the Bitcoin ecosystem where I had a similar aha moment of oh wow, cool, this is now combining open source software, but with financial incentives. And I began thinking hey, what if we did the same thing for science? What if science was fundamentally driven through open data structures and where scientific data that now emerges positive or negative actually fundamentally helps in capital allocation at the speed of financial markets. So that was an early thesis. I wrote a paper paper/blog in 2018, mid-2018. I actually think Benji is going to give a shout out to it during a talk later, so this is how it all comes together. Some of you might remember the early days of Ethereum. This was 2018, and then the first NFT boom. So during the first NFT boom, this concept called crypto kitties actually brought the Ethereum blockchain almost to a halt because it got so much usage very quickly. And you could kind of breed these cats, and you would get new cats with different traits, and it really laid the beginning of kind of the NFT craze. And when that happened, I was doing a lot of work at the time around data attestations and how do we encrypt data on chain, and for instance, attach it to an NFT so that you could do selective disclosure, for instance, of a driver's license. How can you attach a driver's license to an identity on chain? And I asked myself, hey, what if instead of attaching pictures of cats to NFTs, we instead attach a composition of matter paper, like the fundamental novel IP that describes a new medicine? And then what if we further financialize it? And so I think Benji's going to give a shout out to that article in 2018. So it's been almost a 7-year journey for me, helping catalyze this ecosystem and bring it to life. So it's a true honor to stand in front of you today and share that. And ultimately, again, asking, like, why are we here? So I think open science as a fundamental principle is really, really important. The scientific ecosystem actually used to be much more open, I believe, until the First and Second World War, until scientific institutions and scientists began working in a much more closed source fashion to serve the war efforts, right? But that actually translated then later on into our intellectual property system and how corporations today largely develop IP in a very, very closed fashion. The same could have been true for open source software. And many, we kind of forget about the history of software development, but Microsoft famously called open source software a scourge, a cancer that was plaguing the industry. That was I think in the late 90s when Linux really started kind of pushing the envelope on let's make software open source. And you kind of have to, and I'll refer to this later in a slide, that 80% of scientists today, this is from our data, spend 80% of the time applying for funding and 20% actually doing the science. Imagine the same thing was true for software development today. That you could only do software development if you got, and everything was very closed. Linux with that changed the course of history. But we haven't had that opening yet in the scientific ecosystem, right? Linux, Microsoft actually went on to buy GitHub 12, 13 years later, fully leaning into open source software development because it became unstoppable. And I believe DeSci kind of holds the key to enable the same thing for the scientific ecosystem. So that's a bold statement to start with. I know we're already running a little bit late. But I can keep going as well. Alex, how are we doing? Yeah? I can also, I'll take 2 or 3, maybe 2 or 3 questions from the audience. Like maybe what does DeSci or what does science mean to you? Yes. Yes. 100%. A greater socialization. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I actually think that's such an important point. I think I think science today has become really inaccessible for most people. Like we see the end product of science, we see the end product of, maybe we receive the end product of a medicine as a patient, but really scientists, patients, and the end users have been really disenfranchised from each other. Yeah, I think that's a cause worth fighting for.